I now do that.
Sorry, Anna. I just
That's
started.
okay.
Start over again. I'm sorry. I didn't hear it going. So.
Oh, not a problem. So yeah, so I'm just, we'll skip that bit. So I'm just going to be talking here about what to do after dry January, and it's about backing yourself and achieving your drinking goals. And delighted to be here because I know the moderation crew have a lot of really good strategies, really good tactics. I know you're doing your Kickstart program at the moment. And what I want to cover today is just, again, it's an excerpt of stuff that I use day to day in my job. And the most important thing that I want to offer and leave you with really is your relationship with yourself is really super key, because I meet many people day in, day out who don't believe it's possible. So they make some progress towards their goals. Maybe they do Dryuary and they succeed in that, but then they slide. And I want to offer that this really is possible to have a permanent change. And when I mean permanent change, I mean if you just want to drink don't want to drink Monday to Thursday, you just want to drink on the weekends or for a special occasion or any of that, whatever that means for you. Everybody has very different goals. I work with people who have very different goals. And feeling doubt is totally normal. It's totally and utterly normal. And I think when we accept that doubt and that we can move forward with that and knowing that it's going to be okay and that we can achieve our goals, I think it's when it all changes, because it's all about learning skills. Everything to do with drinking and stopping over drinking, I offer, is about learning skills. It's just we have to learn a skill, because at the moment we're just really good at drinking. And then as we unpick that, we become very good at not over drinking. So I'm going to share my screen now. So you should see my opening slide here. As I say, that's what we're going to talk about. So here are the details of today. I'm going to talk about the importance of your drinking story. It's very important. And then the problem with delayed gratification, which is something I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's a really good thing, but there are problems with this. I'm going to talk about building trust, self-trust, evaluating, and really there's one central question that I come to with my clients again and again and again and again. And the more and deeper you're able to go with that question, the more success you will have. So to briefly introduce me, so Anna Childs, I used to be a corporate girl. I had years and years, decades, in fact, in the corporate world. I was a vice president at a Fortune 500 company. I had a P&L of over $60 million. I had hundreds of people working for me. It was a super high achiever, lovely family, all the rest of it. I just drank too much. I just thought I drank too much. And the more I tried to tackle it, the more it eluded me. It was incredibly frustrating. I was used to achieving goals and I just couldn't get this one. So in the end, I just set my time aside. I figured it out. And it was such a miracle that I just had to move into this. So I quit the corporate job and now I coach high achievers like me to get freedom around alcohol, because out of all of the things I've done in my life, this is got to be up there as a super high achievement. And I'm the host and creator of 90 Days Later podcast as well. Okay, so that was kind of like the official blurb. And now here's the backstory that, this is the bit that I hid for a long time. This is my drinking story. It took me years, in fact, to like alcohol. For many years, I didn't like it. I wasn't one of those who took to it like a duck to water. I really had to work on it. I really had to develop the skill of liking drinking. But then what happened was, of course, it became such a repeat thing that I was doing. I became really good at it. And I did something very regularly. So when I talk with my clients and I talk with people and they say, but Anna, it's really hard. This is such an ingrained behavior in me. I totally get it. Because we worry, so we've got this piece in our life and we don't necessarily want so much of that in our life, but we worry if we take it out of our life, what does that mean about us, right? Because it's part of the fabric of who we are. Well, how will changing my drinking change my whole life? Now, this photograph here is of me. We years ago, actually, we bought an American RV, which was kind of interesting in Europe, and we would take holidays and we'd drive around and we'd hook up somewhere. And this is us as we just arrived. And there's me proudly cooking a regular dinner. I used to be so proud that I could cook on this tiny little stove. I'm holding out my Chablis there. Yeah, got my glass of Chablis. Here I am with my wine. I'm all set up. You know, there's not a lot of wine in the glass. Kind of an elegant glass, and I had this whole story that this isn't a big problem because, you know, of course I would drink many of those glasses in an evening, and I had this story that I really just like the good stuff. I like the Premier Cru, you know, the really nice stuff. There was a supermarket we'd go to actually in France, and my children, this is so embarrassing, they would race to the wine and say, here's mum's wine. We grab the wine from the shelves, and that would, you know, do me for the next month or two or whatever. So I had this whole identity. I didn't like who I was becoming. I didn't suffer big hangovers, but I became very belligerent in the moment. I didn't like who I became, but I was secretly working against it because I had the story that I really loved it. And I had this kind of push me, pull me thing going on. I actually really loved white wine. I loved champagne at Christmas. I would tell myself I loved Pimm's, you know, in the summer. I would love a Bloody Mary as a pick-me-up. I mean, I had all these, you know, these attachments, this drink for this, just drink for this drink, but French wine was my big one. So although I hated the negative consequences, I felt like I had a split personality because I was trying to sort of undermining myself. I broke many New Year's resolutions, and I was essentially, the way I saw myself was I was a high achiever, heavy on the doubt. And it was a really lonely place to be, actually, because I didn't like to talk about it, because I did just want to cut back, which is where I know you folks come in. But every time I would speak to this about somebody, they would insist, you know, if I felt that way, I probably had a problem and needed to go to AA, which I knew I didn't. So anyway, that was me. So where I want to start here is I want you to ask yourself, what is your drinking story? Kind of, I laid you out mine there because we all have one. And the thing about this is that I use the word story on purpose because it makes us think of stories we tell children, fiction, right? This story, that story. We believe that it is factual. The way we will talk about ourselves will be factual, but you will find it's opinion based on opinion based on opinion. And this becomes this very significant tale that we tell about ourselves. The killer is that it plays on repeat. It's like that worn old song playing in the background. You don't even hear it. You're probably not even aware it's going on. I know I certainly wasn't at the time, but it's going on all around you. And it's going to be things like alcohol is fun. It's my reward, my treat. I hear a lot from my clients, you know, my parents didn't know how to moderate, so I have no idea myself. I find it easier to not drink than just have a two. How about that one? So we have all these stories and we accept it's who we are without questioning it. So I really want you to, if you're up for it, if you're up for some homework, to question that. The reason why this is so important is that there's nothing wrong with having a drink, right? There's nothing wrong with it if you choose to. I think where we become unstuck is when we have the action on repeat without intention, and it starts to feel out of control. And that's where I was. I see a lot of people when they come to me, they say, I have no control, even though they patently do because they're not drinking every minute of the day. So this is not about being hard on ourselves. This is about, and there's nothing wrong with drinking. We're not judging or shaming here, but it's wanting to get this to a place where we're doing it with intention. It's so important because if we want to have real change where we kind of do this and then we're able to go on with our lives, we have to look at the identity, look what's underneath rather than just packing on tactics. So we have a lot of great tactics. I know the moderation crew have this. I spend a lot of time in your wonderful Facebook group, and there's a lot of support there and strategies and tactics and so on, and it's all excellent. But in the same way that if you break your arm, you're going to want to get someone to do something about the broken bone, fix the bone. You can't just sort of put it in a sling and then, carry on the rest of your life replacing the sling. You want to break the bone. By going in and looking at what's underneath, what's under our identities and how we're seeing ourselves, then when we have the tactics on top of that, it's magical, right? It's when we get all of the benefit. And the way to do this is to start calling yourself out. Start calling out these repeat thoughts or these repeat things that you say. So for instance, one of my other go-to ones was, I used to quite like Southern Comfort on the rocks. And once when I'm in a nightclub, is when I'm sort of late at night in a nightclub, and I kind of got into having it on the rocks because it kind of looked cool. And one of my colleagues said, "Oh, you like SoCo?" And I thought, oh, yeah. That kind of sounds a lot more interesting than Southern Comfort. So I'm a SoCo girl now. I mean, I really was getting into this. And then when I wanted to change my story, I had to decide that I wasn't the type of person who would say, I like Southern Comfort or I like SoCo when I do this, when I think that I have to run out and get one. Right? That was something that I was doing. I just decided that's just not part of what I want to do anymore. And I would redirect and have to literally not think that. So if I thought that, I'd have to say, okay, that's how I was. I'm not thinking that anymore. Right? Because I wanted to be the person who, when they thought about Southern Comfort, didn't feel they had to run out and get one. It's like, I'm from the UK. We eat a lot of fish and chips. And one of my clients actually said, yeah, she really likes fish and chips. But she might think about having fish and chips at 2 p.m. That doesn't mean she has to drop everything and rush out and get fish and chips right there and then. Right, but we think this about wine, we think this about our drinks, and we sort of then go off and, answer that urge with a drink. Right, it doesn't mean we have to. So there's nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong with me wanting to drink a Southern Comfort if that was how I wanted to be. So I had to just literally just start thinking that's just not the type of person. I just don't want to think that anymore. And this is going to be very personal to you. This is why I say I would really write this out. You don't have to show it to anybody, but really start to understand it. As then it starts to feel calm, you start to feel that you get into control. And the really super good reason for doing this is that if you get control over this, if you understand who you are, who you want to be, and you start to say, look, I'm not going to say that anymore because that's not how I want to identify myself. You get complete authority over your actions. The drinking or the over drinking or the drinking when you don't choose to or the drinking when you don't want to will fall away. With my clients, I spend very little time talking about the act of drinking, actually. It's all about the process. It's all about how we are seeing ourselves. Because when you want to stop over drinking, and especially if you manage to get through dry January, and then you've still got thoughts though that telling you that drinking is fun and you're going to feel so deprived and everyone else is doing it and why aren't you? You're going to be in that constant battle with yourself. So call this stuff out and start looking at it. So I want to give you an example of this. Something I hear a lot. I just like the buzz. Right? We go around saying this. I know I used to say this. I just want that first one. I just like the buzz. I just want to. And of course, one was never enough. But we say these things and we kind of state it as a fact. That's why I drink, because I just like the buzz. But what I found was when I was doing this, I would ask, why am I doing that? And it was because I liked the feeling of freedom that it would give me at the end of the day. I'd feel, ooh, now I'm free. My me time. Hear that a lot, me time. But actually what was happening was I was not getting enough pleasure for myself in other areas. I was kind of saving it all. I was having all these things happening in the day, all these stresses, just regular life. And I wasn't taking care of myself during the day. So I was saving it up. So at the end of the day, I just like that. And I would say I just like the buzz and boom, I would get that reward. So I kind of like I was storing up all the stuff. And in the end, again, I had to say, that's given me a sense of freedom, but really is it? Because all I was doing was I was actually pushing myself away because I was numbing. I was creating my own little bubble. And if you recognize this, it's kind of like that nice warm blanket that we have. We feel good now. Don't feel that stress anymore. But actually what I was seeking in the moment was connection. with my family. I wanted to connect to my children and my husband. I wanted to feel with them. But all I ended up doing was kind of pushing away. Oops. We still okay? I was sort of distancing myself. So when you have these stories, when you see these stories, I want you to see, now you might believe them, right? So if you were to do, as I just said, write down your story, you might say, I just like the verse. You might totally believe it. That's okay. But then I want you to ask, is this something that you want to carry on saying? Is this something you want to carry on believing? Is this who you want to be? And if it isn't, you can just drop it. Now you have to keep dropping it many times. You'll have to keep remembering to do this. But so much of this starts with our words. Moving on to delayed gratification. Right, and we say this a lot. I used to say this a lot, and it sounds very sensible and mature, right? So I'm gonna, we're not gonna have a drink in the moment, because that's something that we're seeking right then. We're going to delay that gratification. We're gonna work through the urge, and we'll do all this other stuff because we're doing this for our health and whatever. We'll have all these great reasons, and it all sounds very sensible, and it all sounds. It's very much a long-term view. The problem with this is that it doesn't answer your needs in the moment. And I find so many people get unstuck with this. We say, well, I'm doing it for myself. I say, why are you doing it? Why do you want to change your drinking? Why do you want to moderate? I say, well, I'm drinking too much during the week. It's not healthy. It's not good for me. It's not healthy. Fine. But then at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, after a really hard day at work, wanting to be healthy is not very compelling. It kind of gets blown away with this need that I really just need to relax right now. So the reason this is so important is in that moment, we are drinking because of feelings. And it's either because of a feeling that we currently have that we don't want. For instance, we might feel stressed, or it's because we don't have a feeling that we do want. For instance, we might want to feel calm, and we don't feel calm at the moment, or peaceful. So we have this missing emotion, and we are trying to get that emotion. And what we do is we try to get rid of our what I call negative feelings. We do that with a drink because it softens it, it makes it feel better, and we feel better in that moment, because we absolutely do. But what we're doing is we are just teaching ourselves that that's how we fix the problem that of feeling in the moment. Now, the way we're feeling is not a problem. That's why I do the air quotes. But we have taught ourselves, when we feel this way, we have a drink. We've taught ourselves, and this is why we do it on repeat without knowing about it, as it's all about wanting to feel good. So how you're feeling determines the permanent change. Right? And that's why all of the tactics in the world, they're kind of like their band-aids are going to come off in good time unless we look at this. So how we're feeling determines this. And if you are saying no to a drink, because I really want to say no to a drink because it's healthy and all those other good reasons, and because I've decided not to, but you don't think that's going to be fun, that change is not going to last. And this is again where we can power our way through dry January. We can, I was pregnant 3 times before I got to where I was, and I could power my way through 9 months. I went straight back to drinking. It's because I had this story that it's not going to be fun. So the way to investigate this with your feelings, a lot of feelingy stuff today, is to ask, what am I seeking right now? Or what do I want right now for myself? Right? It could be that in that moment at the end of the day, as I say, you just want to feel relaxed. It could be that you just want to feel connection. It could be that you just want to feel confident. I used to have this big thing about confidence. I had this, as I said, this big job, and I'd have to go to these huge meetings and meet hundreds of resellers and partners and customers and all the rest of it. And I'm quite a shy person. And I would need confidence. So I would teach myself that having a couple of drinks was the way I got confidence for myself. But actually what I wanted was confidence. It wasn't the drink. The drink was just the conduit. But once I knew that I wanted confidence, that I could then start to make changes and look for other ways to get that for myself. So ask yourself, what am I seeking right now? It's a really powerful question, actually. And it works in the moment. It works when you might be struggling. It works when, you know, you're up against the challenge. It's just a way of stepping back. Because this all leads to self-trust. At the end of the day, if you can trust yourself to follow through with what you've decided, you're going to be rocking and rolling. The good way to do this is through resilience, with getting resilience. When you face adversity, so when you put yourself, so when I went through changing my drinking, it was a huge challenge for me. I certainly felt that I was going up against a lot of adversity stacked up in front of me, years, and all the stories, right? All the stories. But when you can rely on yourself to do what it takes, to face all the obstacles and keep going, that's when we build that sense of self-trust. And the beautiful thing here is we then start to see challenges as opportunities. And that maybe sounds a little bit trite, but absolutely this works so brilliantly when I'm with my clients. If they're facing a challenge, if they can just twist it and say, okay, I'm going to go to this party. I really don't want to go, maybe, because there's all these heavy drinkers and I'm really trying to moderate. And it's on a day, you know, I've got this idea and I'm really working on my identity and all the rest of it. You know, it's going, ah. But if they can look at it as an opportunity to say, okay, I've got some things I can try. Right, because it's great to have this, because you can't sort of practice this stuff not in real life. You've got to go out there and do it, and then be able to look at it in a way where you don't judge yourself, right? Get to this more neutral place, because how you talk to yourself when things don't go to plan is so important. A lot of people say, yeah, I'm not gonna beat myself up, and then the first thing we do is we sort of go into this recrimination and remorse. And I'm smiling because that's what we have happen, because we are averse to feeling the adversity, right? We don't want to feel this sense of failure. But as I said just now, how we're feeling is not a problem. If we're able just to have that feeling sit there and accept it and then learn from that, that's how we get stronger and stronger and stronger. And one of the best ways to do this, if you find yourself in this scenario, is to say, I'm willing to figure this out, right? It's a way of saying, I might not have the answer right now. I'm asking myself, what do I need right now? I'm coming up with, I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm willing to figure this out. And I'm just willing just to keep going. And the more we keep going, this is why I personally don't have any of my clients do the going back to day one thing. We don't count days, we actually count cravings, and we just keep moving forward. But building self-trust and backing yourself is really a superpower. So the way we do this is through the power of evaluation. And Mary mentioned I do have podcasts, my 90 Days Later podcast, and I have one episode called Dead End Questions, which I love, because I find when things don't go to plan, we end up asking all these really what I would call rubbish questions. Why was I such an idiot? Why will I never learn? Why am I ever going to fix this? Why can't I just do as I said I was going to do? I mean, all this stuff. And it just comes out. And of course, when we ask ourselves these questions, our brain has got lots of answers. Well, why am I an idiot? You're an idiot because you did it again, right? Why will I never learn? Well, you haven't learned for the last 30 years. So what chance have you got learning now? And none of this stuff helps us. And it feels really judgy and really, really, really heavy. So if we were to look back, so the way I would have you do this, if you were up for it, if you want to learn the power of this, is to pick an occasion when something didn't go to plan. It can be yesterday, or it could be when something went right as well, but just pick an occasion and then step into neutral. Now, my husband is a mathematician, scientist, and he deals with data and hypotheses and all that stuff every day. And he's always talking about peer reviews, right? It's when a scientist writes a paper, as I understand it, and then their peers review it to look into, to check the work and test it. And so that's really where I have my clients do, and I would have you do. So look at a past event, and I want you to go into neutral. And So we're going to do this without any judgment. And again, neutral is good, because in a car, right, whether you're going to go into, we're going to drive forward or reverse, you go through neutral. Because when you're in neutral, you have the choices, right? You can go forward, you can park, you can go backwards. So get to neutral first. It gives you most options. And then look back and say, well, what worked? And you can even do this on a day, like pick yesterday, what worked? And something will always have worked. You must start with what worked, because otherwise we'll automatically want to go into all this stuff went wrong. And it could even be, I was aware I was over drinking. I was aware that I wasn't doing what I thought I would. I was aware I wasn't doing what was of intention. I had some awareness. That's something that worked, right? There's something that you can build on. And then ask what didn't work. Just list it all out, all the stuff. You know, that person came in and I did this and I did the, you know, all the, and this is not where I wanted to end up. And then we pick one thing to say, what will you do differently? And it's always one thing. And it's always an easy thing, because otherwise, I don't know about you, but I read a lot of these books on development, this, development, that, and it come up with this ream of stuff that I could do, and then I forget it all. So I have clients just evaluate, pick one thing, put that one thing into practice. So it could be, for instance, a very popular one is to pause 10 minutes or so before you have your first, you know, when you get to an event, 10 minutes or so before you have your first drink. Did that work? Maybe you lasted 5 minutes. Okay, what was wrong with, you know, what happened? Can we extend it to 6 minutes? Did the 10 minutes work, or all the rest of it? So just go through and just detail by detail by detail, look at it. And it sounds really tedious, but this is a way that you will learn from yourself, because you are the best person to learn from, because this is your experience. Nobody else knows how this feels or what you're trying to achieve for yourself than you. Because then we get to the central question, it's the easiest, is why, right? So along with what am I seeking right now? What am I feeling? Why do I want to drink right now? Why did I take that drink when my friend bought me one, even when I said no? Why did I make that decision to drink? Why did I choose to not listen to myself? Why? And you get really good at, when you can get really good at giving yourself an answer that you like, that's when you're making progress, right? Because very quick, so when I initially do this work with people, they say, well, why? Because I like the taste. Or why? Because I felt like it, right? Or why? Because, or just because. That's where we start. But then when we can really look in there and say, well, why was it? The reason I had the drink was because I was feeling really frazzled, or I was really mad at my husband, right? We get to really what was happening. And then we can see you were feeling really mad or feeling really frazzled because what you needed, what do I need from myself, was you needed relaxation. That was why you did it. And then when we know that, we can say, so how else can you achieve relaxation for yourself? And then we brainstorm on that, have a bath, go for a walk, you know, I don't know, listen to your favorite song, wear something really snuggly and warm, put a literal blanket on you to feel warm. You can get that emotion from somewhere else. And when we start to see that by asking really what we want, and that we can rely on ourselves to deliver that, the need and the action of drinking to achieve that for ourselves, it will fall away. It takes time, of course, but I find that that's creates a much more permanent and long-term solution, rather than just sort of tackling the drinking thing, which can be really frustrating and really tiring and exhausting too. So that's what you do. And whatever reason, this is the other thing, whatever reason you come up with the why, I gave you some examples there, I just offer that you should really like it. Is that a reason that I like? Is that a reason I can stand behind? And it's only me, you only have to do it with you. Nobody else has to buy into this. Do I like that reason? And if you do, fair enough. And if you don't, find another. Because as soon as we start to back ourselves and understand what's driving this and like our reasons and be willing to do the work and be willing to call ourselves out on a story in a very short amount of time. Actually, this does not take a long time. We change to the extent. I do this cool thing actually with clients when we first start working. I have a list of all the things that I get them to describe themselves. And then just a couple of months in, I will relay that back and they will often not recognize themselves. And that's because if you do this work, ask these questions and spend this time with yourself, you become that person without even realizing that you've done it. Right. That was it, Mary. I hope that was good. That was everything. I'm happy to take questions.
I know I have some questions, and before I open it up, just I get to go first. So, first of all, Eileen, can you go ahead and make me a co-host also, because I made you host. I got kicked out for a bit. So,
I'm going to stop the show.
You want to be co-host. Okay.
All right, thank you. You mentioned before I stop recording, you mentioned something about you don't go back to day one. You don't count day ones. You count, what do you count? You said something, I didn't get it all.
I count cravings. So when you have a craving and you successfully, or an urge, whichever way you talk, when you successfully have an urge, when you have an urge to drink and you can let it come and let it go. We're not saying go away, right? We just let it come and we don't drink. That's rewiring the habit. That's reducing your desire because there's a need for desire, there's a request for desire, and you just deny the request. So that's why, because the problem with the day one, day two is that we start to get into, oh my gosh, I've done, 89 days. If I screw up, I'm back to 1 and I don't reach 90. And life isn't like that. We don't do that with anything else. So it's often talk about driving and parking. If you screw up when you're parking, you don't say, I've got to go back to driving lessons.
Right.
That makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for anybody else. If you have a question, you can ask it out loud. I think it will only record, still will only record Anna, or if you don't feel comfortable, just go ahead and put it in the chat.
So Anna, it's Jeff in Canada. Hang on, I'll turn on the video. Boom, there we go. The takeaway from me is what are you seeking right now?
Yeah.
So that's really valuable, and the evaluation, so if I really like that idea, and I like the idea of asking why at the end of all this in your evaluation process. But what happens, you talk about liking your answer. Is that in terms of how accurate it is, or is that because I'm afraid I will come up with answers I don't like your marriage is falling apart, therefore you drink, or you have reached the end of a certain successful phase in your life. I worry that will exacerbate the issues why you are unhappy enough to be boozing in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting, don't you say, because actually when we start to look at this then and we remove the alcohol, then we see what we're left with is our life. Right? That is then what we are left with, because then the question becomes, do we want to drink to tolerate our life, or do we want to create a life that we want to live? So that's a bigger question. That's where I would take that. But what I meant was by liking your reasons was, is it a reason that, you think, okay, I've done that's something that I can work with. So for instance, people might say, well, I want to drink just because it's Monday. It's like, no, I mean, come on, you do other things on Mondays than drink. That's what I meant by that. It's less of the big, but if you do get the big one, that's why we're doing it. I would dig into, okay, so if the marriage is intolerable, what about that? Let's, because without fixing that, the drink then just becomes a plaster or a band-aid rather, to not feel that that's what you're pushing away. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I host a men's group, and we're not a bunch of sensitive new age guys, so we have a really hard time digging into the whys. And if we do it together, inevitably relationships come up, right? And it's because our relationships have survived as long as they have because we like taking the edge off with alcohol. It's what we're doing instead of, meds maybe. But so good session. Thank you.
Thank you. And just on that, it's interesting. I have male clients too. And the why is something that is interesting to say we totally struggle with in the sessions. And part of it is I think when men come to me, what they do, how they create connections and relationships with other people is often around an activity. So that's what I see. And often the activity is drinking. And so when they say, I'm changing this, and so we brainstorm all these other activities they can do that therefore don't involve drinking. So that's a way of still having that connection, because men, anyway, if you get that, that's certainly something I see a lot. So yeah.
Anna, we have a couple questions over here. A couple of people are concerned about vacations. How do you go on vacation and not drink? It's what we've always done. And, I think all of us kind of struggle with, well, everything's a little more fun with drinking. I think we haven't got, especially in the beginning, we haven't got to the point where, yeah, that sounds like fun getting, so how do you deal with vacations and special events?
So I have people look towards them as to what they want to get out of it, right? So we're going on vacation. And what are we doing? Well, there's going to be the sun, there's going to be the beach, there's going to be the spa, it's going to be time to chill with my children. So we look at all the things we want to get. So rather than saying this is going to be really dreary because we're not going to be able to drink and that's the thing that's fun, I mean, we've sort of all tense up about that. I certainly would. So look at, what are we going to get out of this? What are the other things that we are moving towards? How we see this is very important. You need to decide as well, even if you believe that alcohol is fun, does it serve you? Does it help you to go around saying, but alcohol would make this more fun? We just reinforce it. So I just have my clients, so I just drop that, just drop saying it. Even if you're still believing it, even if you're still, maybe they say, okay, here it goes again. I'm thinking alcohol, vacation's more fun with alcohol. I'm just going to choose to not believe that, not to think that at the moment, because we have so many thoughts, most of which we don't do anything about, right? I often think, gosh, I wish I had Julia Roberts' hair. Bit of a mad one to say, but I often wish I had that tumbling hair. I don't rush out to a hairdresser, you kind of, get that hair done, and I don't have lots of anxiety about it because I'm not thinking of it a lot. So if we have these thoughts about vacation is fun, just drop that. And then, as I said, I would really plan on what are the things I'm going to get out of it? How am I going to feel more connected to my children and my partner and all these other things?
Okay.
That's what I would say.
And another question is that somebody that's coming from a long-term abstinence with AA, how do you get over that self-doubt? How do you get over those beliefs that have become ingrained, that we can't trust our own minds?
I think it starts with accepting that these are just things that we have thought for so long. I mean, that there's a large degree of the feeling comes from how we're thinking about ourselves. One easy little tactic to do that is to put the words "and it's okay" on the end of things. So I've spent a long time thinking this and that's okay. I used to believe that and that's okay. Right? I have this this certain sense of lack of self-trust, but that's okay. I'm working on this, right? Make it easy on yourself. We have to stop judging ourselves for this. And then, because there's a big difference between, for instance, so I have clients who maybe feel really disappointed if they go over a drink plan, really disappointed. And we say, okay, so we're disappointed. That's okay. We expect to be disappointed. Sometimes we're going to feel these things. It's not a problem. Where it becomes unnecessarily difficult is then when we shame ourselves for that, right? So I don't have a lot of trust in myself. Okay, so how can I build up trust in myself? That's one thing. But then saying I haven't got a lot of trust in myself, and that makes me a really damaged person, and I just hate that I can't trust myself, and I just, can you see that's a whole other bailiwick of feeling? So strip it back to, I don't have the level of trust right now, but I'm working on it, and it's okay, it's possible, I can make this change. And as I said in I think the one about resilience, keep going forward, keep evaluating, keep going forward, and you will build this the more you do this. But the more you judge yourself, the more you don't want to put yourself up in front of situations, the more you will reinforce that you don't trust yourself.
I love that too. I mean, that's such a comforting thought, instead of always saying, oh God, why did I do this? So, okay, anybody else have any questions? Hey, Jim.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Anna. And I do want to point out to everybody, Anna has a ton of podcasts on her website, and I have listened to a ton of them, and they are excellent. I learned something in every single broadcast, and I thank you so much for making them available. I have a question. It's a little bit different from what we've been talking about. I have a couple of friends who are drinkers.
Yeah.
I know they have medical conditions, which really they shouldn't be drinking, but they're drinking. And I have a friend who had the same medical condition and drank and is dead. So this is a difficult situation. Is there a tactful, diplomatic way of approaching somebody who who's using alcohol, and for sure it's really bad for their health because of a medical condition? Is there any way to successfully broach that topic with somebody? I find it extremely difficult.
It is, and this is where it comes back to people have to want to do this in order to see it, because even as drinkers. So let me answer it this way. I used to, and some of my clients, we have so many thoughts about other people's thoughts, about what they're thinking about us. And if we then start to even tactfully try to address this, then the judgment is going to go up on the other side. I mean, it's really difficult. I usually, if I'm asked about this, it's, well, honestly, they really have to step forward. Unless maybe talking about, well, when I was doing this, I found this thing really useful. Or to just thinking here, say with these clients of mine where they try to do different things, maybe there are opportunities when they get together where it can involve activities that does not involve drinking, right? Because so much of this is just, we do the drinking as part and parcel of the whatever we're doing. So if we're doing something different, like we're going for a walk, we're not sitting around a bar. So we're at least not enabling it. And the moment we start to then have more connection so that we aren't doing the drinking. But honestly, there's not really an easy way there, because
I didn't think so. I just thought I would ask you.
Yeah, no, it's something that I tend to steer clear of, because just
Somebody has to discover it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of lead, maybe, I saw this thing the other day. It was really interesting. I learned a lot, and it's about you. Make it about you rather than about them. That might be something.
Okay.
Anna, just and tell me if I'm way out of line here, but you have a husband who's a mathematician. who's a linear, scientific, logical thinker, did he help and or hinder your evolution from that happy girl with the glass of wine in the RV at the stove to the saner soul I see in front of me on the screen?
Well, it's interesting because he always supports everything I do. He was very much of the opinion, you don't have a problem. What are you on about here? Right. But he's very happy for me to do what I want to do. And, when I explained that it was about how I was feeling, how the person I was becoming in the evening, or the belligerence was unreal. I mean, I just wouldn't believe I'd pick fights just to pick fights. And I will say it was some adjustment, because one of the things we used to go out drinking. I mean, it's one of the things we would go say we're going to go, and I now have, this is my fizzy water in a wine glass. This is my go-to drink. And yeah, there was some adjustment there. People do worry what it's going to do to the relationship, and they do worry you're going to be worried. They worry you're going to make me go alcohol free or not drink so much. What I have found I will offer is that people around me tend to drink less now.
I just come to Jim's point where I agree. It's fraught with peril to attack someone else's drinking for whatever reason, whether they're on meds or off meds, or drinking too much or drinking too little. And my spouse, who is wonderful and supportive, has flat out refused to play bad cop. Like if I'm not doing it for me, I'm not able to walk into that world where I can say, oh, I'm just doing it for you. No, you're not.
Yes. One of my lovely clients, actually, we did a call with her husband as well, because he wanted to know how could he it was wonderful, how could he best support her? And it was really just let her do her thing, right? We can't get into, because even if it's kind and gentle, it starts to feel, why are you asking me that again? Right? I don't need this. This is a very individual thing that we go through.
Anna, this is Mary. I'm gonna turn recording off. It's almost the hour's almost up, and I want to give anybody that wants to ask a question, if they're still not comfortable, give a chance to answer. And we will hang around for a little bit afterwards if anybody wants to stick around for a meeting. So I'm just going to shut the recording off. We're still going. So.